Australia's massive retail sector has been crippled by the coronavirus, with turnover plunging almost 20% in April. COVID-19 restrictions caused many bricks and mortar stores to temporarily close and forced others to shut their doors for good. As stores slowly reopen, the major hurdles facing the sector remain: payroll, rent and consumer confidence. Business reporter Edward Boyd investigates.
COVID-19's impact on the retail sector was swift and vicious. Stores closed, thousands of workers were stood down, and thousands more were let go. Within weeks, the sector was on life support, which eventually came in the form of JobKeeper. Retail writer at The Australian, Eli Greenblat, says while supermarkets benefited from panic buying in the early days of COVID, the discretionary sector fell off a cliff.
In fashion and apparel, they certainly had, 20, 30%, certainly double-digit falls in their sales. Now, yes, a lot of them had a large increase in online sales. Some of them reported a 100% increase in online sales, but that's from a small base. And although there was a large increase in online sales, it wasn't enough to counter the large falls in sales for all their stores, or for many of them when their stores were completely closed. We had many retailers having to close their stores for a month or so, and that's really hurt them.
The $70 billion JobKeeper program began in May, with the wage subsidy providing support to thousands of employees across the country. Some retailers saw an opportunity during the crisis to renegotiate their rental agreements with landlords, making rent a proportion of sales revenue. Others, like Premier Investments, refused to pay rent altogether, setting up a showdown with powerful landlords like Scentre Group, Vicinity Centres and Stockland. Paul Zara, the newly appointed head of the Australian Retailers Association, says the immediate challenges facing the sector are these rental agreements and continuing to pay workers once JobKeeper finishes.
Well, look, there's always been an imbalance of power between landlords and retailers. And what retailers want is some sort of partnership model where retailers do well, landlords do well. When retailers are not doing so well, then landlords do share some of that pain, I guess. So it is the most equitable model on a percentage rent, and we know of some retailers have managed to get that outcome. It's early days, so a lot of those negotiations have continued during this period, so we're waiting to hear more, but we remain hopeful that landlords will come to the party. There are two major pain points for retailers. The first pain point is payroll and paying staff wages, and the second major pain point is rent and having equitable, lease agreements. The major pain point in payroll was actually addressed by the government, so the retailers generally are all very satisfied with what the Morrison government have done to help the sector. I guess the question will be, and there's always going to be some retailers that believe that it hasn't gone far enough. I guess the big question will be around what happens when JobKeeper actually ends come September. And the landlord conversation we've just had, I guess it's now down to timing. It's still early days. We'll understand that a little bit further. But the most important message I'd like to give is that if we don't have landlords assisting retailers, we'll definitely see more store closures, and that would be a sad state of affairs in the country.
Our two largest department store chains approached the crisis differently. David Jones kept its stores open throughout the pandemic, while Myer closed them down. Mr. Zara, the former CEO of David Jones, would not be drawn into talking about which chain handled the crisis better. He is very supportive of the JobKeeper program. You mentioned JobKeeper. It's obviously scheduled to finish in September, although the government is reviewing it this month. Would you like to see the JobKeeper program extended for the retail sector?
I think there are certainly strong arguments for JobKeeper to continue for specific categories. So there are winners and losers within the industry. There's no doubt if you're a supermarket or in pharmaceuticals or anything to do with homewares or building, those retailers have done well, and it wouldn't be necessarily a case for JobKeeper to be extended. However, if you're in categories of discretionary retail or particularly in the travel discretionary retail, then we definitely would need the assistance there. So those retailers would have a strong argument on the JobKeeper continuing.
This week, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg declared Australia was in a recession for the first time in 29 years. The economic downturn is expected to hurt consumer confidence and has already resulted in the household saving ratio increasing from 3.5% to 5.5%. As consumers tighten their wallets, the key for retailers will be to try and encourage customers back into their stores. The turnover is unlikely to return to pre-COVID levels until a vaccine is produced and social distancing dropped, which might not be until next year. Edward Boyd, Sky News.